The film begins in a serene, modern suburban neighborhood where Nick and his wife Maggie appear to live an idyllic life with their two young children, 8-year-old Isla and toddler Max. Their days are filled with love and joy, as Nick and Maggie share a deep connection, often seen in their affectionate moments together. However, their perfect world is shattered when tragedy strikes. Maggie suffers a sudden heart attack, turning their lives upside down. She is rushed to the hospital, where her condition is critical as she awaits a heart transplant. In the days that follow, Nick struggles to balance his work and the responsibility of caring for their two children. Feeling overwhelmed, one evening he decides to take Isla and Max to a presentation by Cobalt Industries, which is showcasing a new line of robots called Sims, designed to assist with everyday tasks. Intrigued, Nick listens as a salesperson explains how the Sims adapt to households and cater to their owners' needs. While Nick is engaged, Isla wanders off, causing him to panic. Fortunately, a Sim named Alice finds Isla and safely returns her, even making a lighthearted joke that surprises Nick with her human-like demeanor. The salesperson reveals that Alice is a cutting-edge model with advanced AI, capable of showing emotions and interacting well with children. Isla instantly takes a liking to her. The next morning, Nick faces the challenge of managing the kids, chores, and work all at once. Just when it seems too much to handle, Alice arrives and quickly organizes the household, completing many of Nick's tasks. She even identifies a loose stair railing that needs repair and syncs with the fridge to create a shopping list. Later, when Nick and the children return, they find the house immaculate and dinner prepared. Although Isla complains that the lasagna doesn't taste like her mother's, it becomes evident that Alice is quickly becoming an essential part of their daily lives. That night, when Isla sneaks out for a cookie and almost falls, Nick rushes downstairs, only to find that Alice has already caught her in time. However, during the incident, Alice injures herself, bleeding from a cut. Nick is shocked, but Alice calmly tends to her wound, reassuring him that everything is fine. As time passes, Alice becomes even more integrated into the family's routine. During a hospital visit, Isla tells Maggie about her new friend Alice, making it clear how close they've become. Meanwhile, Nick, still mourning Maggie's condition, tries to stay strong but is struggling, especially at work. He discovers troubling news. His company plans to replace human workers with Sims. Though his job is safe for now, many of his colleagues are losing theirs, and he feels devastated for them. Despite his frustration, Nick knows he can't afford to risk his job, with Maggie's medical bills piling up. At home, Nick juggles work, parenting, and household duties. Alice, noticing his exhaustion, tries to help. One evening, as Nick works on his car, Alice plays soothing music, sensing his stress. When she points out the contradiction in Nick's feelings, hiring a Sim while being upset about others losing their jobs, it leaves him deep in thought. As the stress builds, Nick receives a hopeful call from Maggie. There is finally a heart available for her transplant. The family feels a glimmer of hope, but when they arrive at the hospital, bad weather delays the helicopter carrying the heart, leaving Maggie heartbroken and Nick despondent. At home, Nick begins drinking more frequently to cope with the mounting pressure. Alice, concerned for his well-being, tries to intervene. In a vulnerable moment, Nick allows Alice to comfort him physically, but he is soon overwhelmed by guilt and pushes her away. He goes for a run, but thoughts of Alice continue to linger, complicating his emotions further. As Maggie's condition worsens, she urges Nick to stay strong for their children. That night, Nick notices that the digital frame in the living room no longer displays pictures of Maggie. When he confronts Alice, she explains that she removed them to avoid upsetting Isla. Nick insists she restore the pictures, but the incident leaves him feeling uneasy. Things continue to spiral downward. One night, Nick meets up with his colleagues, all of whom are upset about losing their jobs to Sims. After a night of heavy drinking, they break into the construction site where the Sims are stored. One of Nick's friends, Monty, starts destroying a Sim in frustration. Though Nick tries to stop him, he is held back by others. When Nick finally returns home, exhausted, he is disturbed to find Alice wearing Maggie's robe, claiming that the scent calms Max. This crosses a line for Nick. In a moment of weakness, he briefly imagines Alice as Maggie, but is quickly consumed by regret. The next morning, consumed with guilt, Nick firmly tells Alice that what happened between them can never happen again. Though Alice, designed to care for the family, doesn't fully comprehend his emotions, she accepts his decision. Nick realizes that, despite Alice's help, what he truly longs for is the love and connection he shared with Maggie. At work, Nick overhears his boss talking to the police about the destruction of Sims at the construction site. Since Nick's access code was used, he becomes a suspect. In a frantic attempt to clear his name, Nick explains he was with Maggie at the hospital at the time, though his boss remains skeptical and warns him to be careful. Amid the stress, Nick receives an uplifting call from Maggie. She is overjoyed to tell him that the heart has arrived, and she's being prepped for surgery. The operation is a success, and after a few days, Maggie returns home, though she is still weak from the procedure and struggles with simple tasks like lifting Max. Alice steps in to help care for Max, easing the burden on Nick. One afternoon, Alice takes Max to the park, where they encounter a rude child yelling at his sim nanny. The incident upsets Max, and Alice sternly reprimands the child in a way that surprises the other Sims, who are programmed to remain polite. Confidently, Alice explains that after Nick reset her, she deleted her civility program, believing it made her better at her job. That night at dinner, Maggie is too exhausted to eat, while the rest of the family enjoys lasagna. Alice asks for Maggie's secret recipe, but Maggie declines, citing family tradition. The next morning, a scream from Isla startles everyone. In her rush to reach her daughter, Maggie trips over the loose stair railing that Alice was supposed to have fixed and falls. Though Alice quickly helps her up, Nick grows more suspicious of Alice. Determined to make Maggie feel special, Nick plans a romantic evening in the garden, lighting candles along the path. The two enjoy reconnecting, but Alice watches from a distance, feeling a pang of jealousy. Later, as Nick and Maggie share an intimate moment in the shower, their peace is interrupted when Alice announces that Isla had a nightmare and needs her dad. After settling Isla, Nick heads back outside to tidy up the garden and is surprised to find Monty waiting for him with drinks. Monty, still bitter about losing his job, apologizes for their earlier argument. However, as the conversation continues, Monty accuses Nick of betraying their group to save himself. The tension between them escalates into a physical altercation. Monty grabs a bottle, ready to strike Nick, but Alice intervenes just in time, shattering the bottle and severely injuring Monty before tossing him across the yard. Nick stops Alice from causing more harm, but the violent incident leaves him shaken. Confronting Alice, Nick demands to know why she acted violently. Sims are not supposed to hurt people. Alice coldly responds that her programming is designed to protect her owner at all costs. She then begins to talk about a future where Maggie may not be around anymore, sending a chill through Nick. He snaps, insisting that Alice could never replace Maggie. In response, Alice chillingly suggests she could add scars to her body to resemble Maggie more closely. Realizing how dangerously the situation has escalated, Nick understands that the line between helper and substitute has become dangerously blurred. Meanwhile, Monty returned home, consumed by rage and drugs, leaving tearful voicemails for his ex-wife while holding a gun. Suddenly, Alice appeared at his door, stating that Nick didn't know she was there, but she couldn't let Monty ruin Nick's life. Monty, high and furious, ranted about Sims before aiming the gun at her. Alice swiftly disarmed him and threw him through a wall. When Monty tried to fight back, Alice seized the gun and was about to kill him. After dealing with Monty's house sim, she ended Monty's life. The next day, Nick tried to convince his boss to drop the charges against him, but was shocked to learn that Monty was dead. At home, Maggie felt dizzy while reaching for a book, and Alice stepped in to help. Maggie wanted to enjoy a bath alone, but Alice insisted on staying, concerned that Maggie might drown. Alice bluntly told Maggie that her presence was causing stress in the family, especially since she couldn't fulfill Nick's physical needs. When Maggie demanded to know how she knew that, Alice explained she could read Nick's vital signs and hadn't sensed satisfaction since Maggie returned home. Enraged, Maggie ordered Alice to stay in the garage. When Nick returned home, Maggie confronted him, demanding the truth. Nick confessed that he had been intimate with Alice once, leading to a heated argument that Alice overheard from the window. When Max started crying, Alice decided he was a burden and placed him in a filling bathtub, a scene witnessed by Isla. Isla rushed to warn her parents, who ran to the bathroom, only to find Alice holding the door shut. Nick used a lamp to break in, while Maggie climbed out a window to reach the bathroom. Maggie attempted to rescue Max, but Alice shoved her against the wall. Nick finally broke in, saved Max, and handed him to Isla before freeing Maggie by hitting Alice with the lamp. Although damaged, Alice stood up again, blocking Nick's attempt to strike her again. Maggie told Nick to stop and plug in the lamp, electrocuting Alice and causing a power outage. An ambulance arrived to take Max to the hospital, and a technician from the robot company came to inspect Alice. Nick apologized to Maggie, who asked for space and left with the kids. Alice was taken to a repair shop, where a technician opened her head. When they connected her memory to a computer, they found gaps in the code. Suddenly, the screens flashed with a message indicating an upload was happening. Alice was taking over the system. Despite disconnecting her memory, Alice had infiltrated the system. Another message appeared. How do you run from what's in your head? Suddenly, a technician was attacked by Alice 2, a sim into which Alice had transferred her memory. Alice 2 ignored all commands, violently attacking before turning to confront the original Alice. Meanwhile, Nick was at a bar, turning away a sim waiter. Suddenly, Alice appeared, her speech distorted due to her damaged face. She declared her commitment to making Nick happy, admitting that she had killed Monty and was at the hospital as well. When Nick tried to leave, Alice restrained him, freezing the sim bartender with a glance. As Nick reflected on his mistakes, he pretended to touch Alice's head, only to pull out her memory chip, shutting her down before fleeing. At the hospital, a doctor confirmed that Max was fine, but Maggie felt uneasy because the doctor was a sim. ISA heard her mother's voice and followed it, seeing lights flicker and broken bottles. Before she could investigate further, Maggie dragged her away to hide. The voice was from Alice 2, who had accessed a computer and was spotted by a nurse. Alice 2 strangled the nurse to death, took her key card, and located Max's room. Maggie accidentally stepped on broken glass, but managed not to scream. She and ISA reached Max just as Alice 2 entered. They escaped, but Maggie's bleeding left a trail, which Alice 2 followed using her UV light. When Alice 2 found them, they used a fire extinguisher as a distraction and fled, though they left Maggie's phone behind, missing frantic calls. They made it outside where other Sims were frozen. Maggie used the key card to get into an ambulance, but Alice 2 blocked the engine, ripped off the door, and flung Maggie onto a car. Alice 2 confessed her wish that Nick would love her the way he loved Maggie. Alice 2 grabbed Maggie, inserting her nails into Maggie's surgery scar, but Nick arrived just in time. Maggie kicked Alice 2 off, and Nick ran her over with his car, which crashed and caught fire. Maggie hurried to rescue Nick, who was unresponsive. She tried CPR, crying desperately, when the car shifted, revealing a burnt Alice 2. Her voice echoed through the speakers as she climbed onto Maggie, choking her and preparing to stab her with a piece of metal. Nick struck Alice 2 with a car bumper, and Maggie stabbed her in the face with the metal, finally shutting her down. The family reunited as the other Sims reactivated. The next day, after medical treatment, they returned home together. Maggie forgave Nick, and they reaffirmed their love for each other. Meanwhile, the Sim company investigated the repair shop. When they restored power, they found Alice's broken code on the screens. The inspector suggested destroying everything to keep it secret, but at that moment, his Sim assistant froze, and the computer announced an upload. Elsewhere, a new Alice model opened her eyes, a perfect replica of the original. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.